The clasp on the gray case clicked open with a neat little sound that did not belong in a room full of breath. Duke Malreth stepped to the center of the dome and lifted the master diffuser with two careful hands, like a priest raising a book. The device was small, ribs, membrane, a pressurized vial, and very sure of what it was made to do. 10-step space, Queen Arya said. Her voice was calm and plain. The guards moved in a practiced arc. Chairs scooted back. The aisle cleared, without shouts. The old stone of the treaty chamber held its breath. The diffuser sighed. It was not a roar. It was a thin, even breath, designed to look harmless, to feel like nothing, to be everywhere at once. A counterfeit pattern spread from the Duke's chest level and tried to lie flat under the dome like a false morning mist. Ben was already moving. He raised his hand toward the roof team. Dome sleeves full open, he said. Braziers steady. Above, the new chimney sleeves drank harder. Warm lift rose along the walls. The braziers made thin columns of gentle heat that taught the air which way to go. The first sheet of counterfeit pattern reached for the old stone, and then the updraft caught it and pulled. Reader, Ben said softly. The healer lifted the small device. Its screen blinked with a bright halo at first, then drew lines, clean arrows from salt packets under benches toward the center of the dome. The salt map did what it had promised. It turned air into a witness. Duke Malreth watched the arrows appear. For a heartbeat he looked surprised, then his face smoothed, as if he had always expected to be seen and had prepared a second story for that too. Arya felt the first tap of the reflex in her fingertips, a tiny bird knocking at the bones. She lifted her palm to confirm space. 4 in, she breathed, hearing the healer's quiet count in her ear. 6 out. The tremor stayed small. The updraft kept drinking. The bird settled on its perch and did not fly. The guard captain stepped along the edge of the 10-step circle, not breaking it. Hand only, she told her team. No strike. Catch the tool. 2 guards moved in from angles that did not block the updraft. One took the diffuser with a cloth bag. The other held the Duke's wrist, firm and respectful, as if they were asking him to wait in a doorway. The diffuser went into the bag. A third guard pinched the vial out with tongs and sealed it in a tube. The reader's arrows pointed now not just to the air above the Duke, but back along a faint trail in the side aisle, the path he had walked to the dome. Salt packets under the benches lit in a soft sequence like lanterns marking a road. Ben spoke so the room would hear the logic. You can see the trail, he said, his tone like a teacher's. These small packets show the flow. They do not accuse by rumor. They show where the air went. The scribe with the lens filmed the glowing reader screen, the bagged diffuser, the sealed vial. The archivist held out a cloth and a stick of wax. Seal, she said. The guard pressed the wax. With the city's mark, Duke Malreth smiled at last, a thin line. Such clever toys, he said, easy and soft. One might almost think all of this was staged for a camera, a scene in a play about a dangerous tool and a helpful servant. How charming. No, Arya said. The word was gentle and steady. Not a play, a proof. She looked to the archivist. Read the chain. The archivist, who had waited for this moment with patience that came from years of counting, stepped onto the low step and spoke in clear, simple words. Chain of custody, she said. Canister from the canal, coded additive matching this. Vial, sealed by me at the hour named yesterday. Bellows from the palace steps, same code sealed. Sealing tag from the hall, bearing the Weapons Guild lattice, bagged in cloth, then waxed. Ledger from Rook Street Depot, consumables log, entries marked authorized by LM sealed. Patron card from the safe, Duke Malreth, Guild Patron Level 3, emergency access, sealed. 3 statements by intruders from the hub, each noting, a lapis-pinned man in payments passed under the name of the Guild City office, recorded and countersigned. Now this diffuser and this vial, taken from the Duke's hands in the treaty chamber, sealed. She held the stacked packages at her chest, small bricks of truth wrapped in cloth. The room had been ready to break into 10 different conversations. It did not. It did the harder thing. It listened. Malreth's smile did not change. He tilted his head like a man humoring a child. Additive codes can be forged, he said. Cards can be misplaced. Young men can be paid to say words they do not understand. I came to help test your dangerous ceiling, Your Majesty. I held a case because your captain asked me to show it for the camera, so the city would see you as brave. He spread his empty hands. I am loyal. Ben did not answer him. He did not speak about loyalty or pins or smiles. He spoke to the whole hall the way he had spoken to a hot bay and a stormed canal. This is simple, he said. A reflex in a person's body can be triggered by a pattern in the air. That is true. The pattern can be made by human salt. That is true. It can also be faked. That is true. We did 3 things. We made rules. We mapped the air. We told the room what to do, and it told us what was happening. He lifted the diagram he had folded and unfolded all morning. He showed its arrows and circles, the little X's, the words written in block letters, lanterns to updraft, 10-step, salt map. We are not acting, he said. We are working. A murmur rose, not a roar, not a tangle, but the sound of people putting weight on something studied and finding that it holds. The scribe's lens caught faces, a kitchen worker nodding, a courier frowning in thought, a visiting dignitary rubbing his chin, a child on a bench mouthing the words, 10 steps. Arya looked at Malreth. You may speak further, she said. But you may not hold a device. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Some men do not know what to do with empty hands. The guard captain lifted her hand. We will take the Duke to a side table, she said, and sit him there. He may answer questions while we finish the ceilings. He may not leave. There was no dragging, no roughness. 2 guards walked with him, palms light at his elbow, the way one guides an impatient traveler past a narrow point on a bridge. The crowd parted and closed again. The room did not break. The archivist passed the new sealed tube to the healer. The healer clipped it to a board with the others. The board looked odd in a chamber of banners, humble packages, not blades or bright signs, but it steadied the eye. Let us finish, Arya said. The last pages of the accord were brought forward by scribes whose hands did not shake. The delegation stood, then sat again because the Queen smiled and said, Please sit. It is warm. We will be kind to ourselves. They signed in order. The pen stroke sounded like small rain. Wax took seals. Names touched paper and did not burn. The scribe with the lens filmed each, not lingering for drama but giving equal weight to every hand. Between signatures, the healer looked at Arya's face. Fine sweat at the temple, hands steady, breath smooth. You are good, she murmured. I'm good, Arya agreed, and there was no pride in it, only the knowledge that comes from practice. When the last seal cooled, the herald struck the step once, and the room gave itself one gentle clap, more like a thank you than a cheer. The accord was signed. No trick in the air had changed the ink. Only then did Arya turn fully to the crowd. We learned something together, she said. We learned that fear tries to spread like smoke. We learned that rules can make a room safer than a sword. We learned that a body's reflex is not shame. We learned that an honest map can turn air into witness. She faced the visiting delegations. Because of this, I propose 2 simple protocols for all courts, halls, and assemblies that wish to join us. First, a clean air protocol. Basic. Vents, simple filters, and posted airflow maps for large rooms. Not expensive devices, cloth and charcoal, fans and sleeves. Test days, not just show days. Open records. Second, a consent protocol. A standing 10-step space around leaders and speakers with clear language on approach and permission. Hands announced. Steps counted. No surprises. She looked toward Ben then, not as a performer choosing a moment, but as a person recognizing work. This map, she lifted the diagram, was made by a human technician named Benjamin Cole, who treated a queen like a pilot in a storm, with clear steps, calm words, and respect. We have old stories about salt-bearers, strangers whose simple care helped a queen hold her battle mind steady. I see now that the story was never about magic or control. It was about knowledge and kindness. Ben felt dozens of eyes hit him like sunlight. He shifted his weight because he was a man who liked tools more than speeches. He put one hand on the vest where a pencil stuck and nodded once, small. Arya continued, "On this day, I name humans who work in this way, who measure, who explain, who ask before they step, sent kin of the Lyrian court, partners not owners, colleagues not masters." She lifted her palm. "If any here object to a word like kin, I will change it. If any here want to be included under it, I will open it." No one objected. A few hands went to hearts in the Lyrian style. A visiting dignitary from the coast stood and bowed, not low, not fawning, just honest. "We will copy your rules," he said. "We have an old hall made of wood. It breathes poorly. We will make it breathe better." The crowd began to murmur in that good way again. Ideas, not panic. Only one corner stayed still and cold. The side table where Duke Malreth sat with his lapis pin and his slow smile. The guard captain stood near him with a scribe and 2 witnesses. They asked questions about the sun above the royal spaceport burned white and hard. Heat rose from the landing slabs in slow waves, bending the air. Inside Bay 7, fans hummed, but the cooling grid had failed an hour earlier. The bay smelled like hot metal and old ozone, the way a storm sometimes smells inside a machine. A human technician named Ben wiped his forehead with the clean corner of a rag and checked the thermal readout again. Red numbers blinked like angry eyes. He had been sent here to repair a cracked coil in the docking field. The job was simple if the bay was cool. Today the bay was an oven. He was alone on the scaffold with a toolkit clipped to his belt and a small music player inside his pocket that did not work because the bay's interference was too strong. He preferred quiet anyway. Quiet made it easier to think. Down the long corridor, a ceremonial door unfolded. Silver Guard stepped out first in polished armor, helmets smooth like river stones. Behind them, Queen Arya of the Lyrians entered Bay 7. She was tall and graceful, her armor shaped to allow movement rather than to frighten. Her crest of dark hair was woven with thin strings of silver, and her eyes were the strange, steady blue of her people. She had chosen to pass through the bay on foot before leaving for a peace summit across the sea. She liked to see her ships with her own eyes and thanked the crews who kept them in flight. Ben saw the motion and paused his work. He was high on the scaffold and did not want to be noticed. He respected this queen. He had watched a broadcast of her speech once. She talked not about conquest, but about clean air, clean water, and a future where small stations like this one could grow gardens for the people who lived near them. The speech had stayed with him for days. The Bay Chief hurried to the Queen's side and bowed. "Your Majesty, we are honored. The coil is being repaired at this very moment." "Thank you," said Arya. Her voice was clear. She looked around, the bay calmly, as if the heat did not touch her. "Safety first, take your time." Ben finished tightening the brace on the cracked coil. Then he climbed down the scaffold and lifted the replacement unit from its crate. It was heavier than it looked. The heat made his muscles slow. He adjusted his grip and set his feet. Sweat ran down the back of his neck, under his collar, and across his shoulder blades. He did not like the feel of it, but told himself to focus on the path and keep the unit level. He took the short walkway that cut across the bay. It ran near the Queen's route. He tried to walk fast without looking rushed. He did not mean to pass close to her. The walkway had been cleared, but one of the guard drones had settled in a place that forced him to shift toward the royal party for only a few steps. 2 steps were enough. Arya turned her head at the soft clink of the unit against Ben's tool, harness. The air shifted. She breathed in. The scent of human salt, faint and warm, reached her nose. Her pupils widened in sudden shock. Her balance faltered. The fine servos in her armor twitched, not with power but with error, like a hand brushing the wrong string of a harp. Arya's next step went crooked. The nearest guard saw the queen tilt and move to steady her, but the wrong motion in a hot bay can become a cascade. "Do not touch her," the court healer said fast. She was small with bright eyes. "Give her air. Now." The guards froze. Arya stood still and took one shallow breath followed by another. Her fingers trembled. The tremor spread to her forearm. The Bay Chief took one step forward and then stopped, afraid of doing the wrong thing. Ben stopped too. He did not set down the unit because the floor vibrated and he did not want it to crack again. He stayed where he was and said in a clear, steady voice, "Your Majesty, I am a human technician. I am at a safe distance. I do not move unless you say, do you want me to adjust the nearest fan to increase airflow toward the exit doors?" Arya's eyes moved to him. She seemed to listen hard, as if his words were threads she could hold. "Yes," she said. Her voice stayed calm, but her lips were a little pale. "Do that. Thank you." Ben took one slow step to the wall panel. He kept his eyes on the fan controls and not on the queen. He announced every move so there would be no mistake. "I raise the intake," he said. "I open the exit vents." Air shifted across the bay. The heat still pressed like a hand, but a new current carried the air past Arya and toward the open doors. Her tremor did not stop at once, yet it did not worsen. The court healer breathed out and nodded. "Your Majesty," the healer said, "I think you are experiencing a bioreflex. It is rare, but it can be strong. Please stand still and count with me." Arya closed her eyes. She lifted her palm, asking every person around her to give space. The guards drew back another step. The bay crew watched from a distance and tried not to whisper. "Count 4 in," said the healer, "and 6 out." Arya obeyed. The tremor eased a little. Ben stayed by the panel. He did not move the heavy coil because any loud sound could startle the queen's reflex again. He kept speaking in a calm voice so that all motion would be expected. "I will shut down heat sources near the walkway," he said. "I will place this clean cloth on the small fan by the low handrail. The cloth is dry, it will reduce any scent." "Good," said the healer. "Do it." Ben did not come closer than 10 steps. He laid the cloth carefully. He turned the fan so that the air traveled away from Arya and toward the door. He brought down the temperature in 3 small panels that radiated heat into the lane. He announced each step in simple words. The Bay Chief quietly ordered the rest of the crew to copy Ben's calm tone. After a few minutes, the tremor stopped. Arya opened her eyes. Color slowly returned to her face. "I am stable," she said. "Thank you." The Bay let out a breath. The guards checked the perimeter. The healer stepped close enough to examine the queen's pupils and pulse. Then she looked at Ben. Her gaze was curious, not angry. "You handled this well," she said. "What is your name?" "Ben," he answered. "Benjamin Cole. Maintenance level 3. "I will remember it," said the healer. "This reflex connects a scent to the queen's neural net. The trigger is not musk or magic. It is simple chemistry. Human salt markers cross with a rarity in her genome that exists in some royal lines. It can happen from a direct scent or from a volatile chemical that mimics the same pattern. It causes balance errors, servo interference, and sometimes noise in the telepathic band that our people use for short-range signals. The queen remains herself. She needs clear air, cool conditions, and time for her body to reset." Ben nodded. He liked the healer's clear words. "I can help with air and cooling," he said. "I have a few basic ideas." The Bay Chief coughed. He was worried about rank and protocol. The queen lifted her hand, making a small motion that meant speak. "Say your ideas," she told Ben. "First," Ben said, "we can add a cooling corridor between the ship and this bay. The air in that corridor should flow out, not in. I can angle 2 fans and 1 temporary duct to do this now. Second, we can place carbon cloth and powdered charcoal inside the fan housings where air leaves the queen's path. They will absorb some scent. Third, we can set a protocol for approach. No one passes within 10 steps of the queen unless they call out their position and reason. If a person must approach, they ask permission first. This rule protects the queen and reduces surprise. The healer nodded. Simple is best, she said. I approve. Arya looked at Ben again. Her gaze was thoughtful. You spoke to me as if I were a pilot in a storm, she said. I worked search and rescue before this, Ben answered. Pilots in storms need two things. They need clear steps and they need to know they are not alone. Arya's mouth curved in a small, true smile. That is wise, she said. The Bay Chief hurried to gather supplies. Ben set the heavy coil on a padded crate and got to work. He and 2 crew members built the cooling corridor from spare duct plates and a roll of sealant. The guards watched, with their hands on their weapons but kept back. The healer helped fold the carbon cloth and taped it where Ben pointed. They worked fast. The bay grew cooler. When the corridor was done, Arya tested it with the healer. She walked slowly through the lane. The air moved around her like a calm river. There was no tremor. She paused near the end, turned, and looked toward the maintenance scaffold. Her eyes rested on an old mural on the far wall. The paint had faded. It showed a story from Lyrian legend. A queen on a cliff and a stranger offering her a piece of salt to purify a well. The court archivist, a quiet woman with a deep memory, stepped closer and bowed. Your Majesty, she said. I remember this tale from the old records. The stranger is called a salt-bearer. The legend says that in a time of disorder, a queen would find focus when a salt-bearer stood near her and helped her hold steady. It is not a story about control. It is a story about partnership. The salt-bearer did not lead the queen. He simply made the air clear and the path true. Arya's eyes softened. Then the old painters knew what we learned today, she said. The archivist nodded. Perhaps they faced a similar reflex in the past. Perhaps they learned to calm it with simple acts of care. Ben listened while he tightened the last bracket on the duct. He did not speak. He did not want to put himself inside a legend. He only wanted the bay to be safe for the queen and for anyone who walked here. The bay chief returned with a formal report for Arya to sign. It stated that the coil repair was complete and the corridor was ready. The queen signed it with a firm hand. The guards formed up. The healer handed Ben. Morning came with a pale sky and a thin wind off the sea. The royal city woke slowly, but the summit hall did not sleep. Workers rolled out carpets, engineers tested lamps, scribes set chairs in careful rows. Guards walked long loops with patient feet. The hall was a bright, high space with pillars shaped like the trunks of old trees and windows that opened like wide eyes. Above the dais, thin banners hung in 2 lines, one for each nation that would sign the peace. Ben arrived early with a tool bag and a folded map. He kept the map simple. It showed the hall with arrows for wind, circles for filters, and small X marks for places where scent might pool. He carried bundles of carbon cloth, rolls of kitchen gauze, and packets of common charcoal ground to a fine dust. He wore a fresh shirt, and over it, a light vest with pockets. He had tied salt-absorbing wraps around his wrists as an extra precaution. The wraps were made of cotton lined with a thin layer of charcoal and salt crystals. They looked plain. They worked well. The bay chief met him at the west door. You were right, the chief said, tapping the map. The air wants to spiral. Here near the side gallery. We added a fan but kept it low to avoid noise. The healer is here with a small analyzer. She says she can see the basic pattern of human salt if it is strong. Not from far away, but close. Good, Ben said. We do not want a circus, we want clear rules. He found the healer near the dais with a compact case open on a table. She nodded to him and lifted a small device that looked like a flute with a tiny screen. Portable. Reader, she said. It checks for a few simple markers, nothing flashy, enough to tell us if a room has changed suddenly in a way that matches the queen's reflex. Perfect, Ben said. We keep it plain. We keep it honest. They started to work. Ben set 2 low fans in the side gallery and angled them so that air moved toward high vents, not back into the hall. He cut carbon cloth to fit inside the vent covers. He asked for a stepladder and placed one cloth above the dais where a warm pocket of air would otherwise settle. He moved with care. He marked each change on the map. The guards watched, first with stiff faces, then with interest. A problem that looks like magic becomes less frightening when someone shows you the steps to solve it. After an hour, the hall, staff gathered for a short briefing. There were guards in armor, scribes in plain robes, engineers in work jackets, and a group of kitchen staff who had come early to set tea for guests. Ben stood on a low step so his voice would carry without shouting. "Good morning," he said. "We will go over 3 simple rules. These help everyone, not just the Queen. They make crowds safer. They make rooms easier to breathe." He held up one finger. Rule 1. The 10-step space. No one moves within 10 steps of the Queen unless they call out their approach and say why. If the Queen says wait, you wait. If she says come, you come. If she says no, you stop. The rule is about permission and safety. He held up a second finger. Rule 2. The air path is a road. Treat it with respect. Do not block the marked lanes with carts, instruments, or banners. If a lane must be crossed, do it quickly and then clear it. He held up a third finger. Rule 3. If something strange fills the air, we do not rush. We do not crowd the Queen. We make the path open and let the air move out. We use our tools, not our fear. He paused to let the words settle. We practice once now, he added. I will play the part of the Queen. The healer will watch the air. The guards will stand as they would at the event. When I lift my hand, everyone near me will count their steps out loud while moving back to 10. Then I will point and 2 people will announce their approach and ask to help. He lifted his hand. People moved. Steps counted out loud in steady voices. 10. The sound was calm. It felt like a song without notes. The healer watched the air on her small screen and nodded. The guards made 2 lines that left a clear lane from the door to the dais. The kitchen staff smiled with relief. They liked rules that were simple and fair. Queen Arya arrived during the last round of practice. She wore travel armor with a pale, cooling cloak across her shoulders. Her hair was braided close because the day would be warm. When she stepped into the hall, the guards announced her with a clear tone, not a shout. The people in the hall naturally made space. The air felt clean and ordered. Arya watched for a moment, then joined the end of the practice lane like any other person. When the line reached the dais, she bowed to the workers. Thank you for your care, she said. These rules honor all of us. Ben kept his distance but gave a small nod. She returned it with a look that said she saw him even from across a room. News from Bay 7 had not rested overnight. It ran through markets and balconies, took a cup of tea in courtyards, and crossed bridges in the hands of messengers who liked to talk. Most tales were kind. A few carried poison. In more than one corner of the city, people said the word control with dark eyes. By mid-morning, the words had grown legs long enough to step into the palace. Duke Malreth did not waste that wind. He met quietly with small groups of nobles and the owners of certain news sheets. He did not make direct claims. He asked questions in careful voices that then appeared as headlines as if from nowhere. Was the Queen safe from chemical tricks? Was the throne now open to the air? Would a wise ruler avoid all crowds until this strange weakness could be fixed? None of these words accused. All of them suggested. Ben did not read the sheets. His hands were full with fans and chalk. But he could feel the shift as clearly as one feels a breeze change direction on the face. Guards grew tighter in the shoulders. Servants moved with their chins tucked. A hum darker than work spread across the hall. Arya asked the healer for a copy of one sheet. She read the questions in silence and then set the paper down. We will answer with daylight, she said. Show people what we do and why. So they did a small demonstration at noon. The doors were opened. A few reporters came in with pencils and small cameras. Ben explained the corridor of air in short, honest sentences. The healer added 3 points about chemistry and the Queen's reflex. Arya walked from the door to the dais while the portable reader measured the air. The reporter nearest Ben asked if human scent controlled the queen. No, Ben said, looking the reporter in the eyes. Control is a cruel word. This is a reflex in her body that can be triggered by a simple pattern. We cannot control a reflex with a will. We can support a person through it with care. Another reporter asked if the queen was embarrassed by this. Arya answered herself. A person's health is not shame, she said. It is part of being alive. We will keep each other safe. We will not hide. That is the choice. The room calmed. The demonstration ended. The healer packed her device. The guards returned to their posts with a cleaner breath. For a moment, it felt like the worst noise had been turned down. The rest of the day turned to travel. The queen would visit a small memorial garden on the city's far point and then ride by covered boat along the inner canal to show her face to the people. It was not part of the summit. It was a promise she had made to the families of workers who had died building the East Flood Wall. She refused to cancel it. The canal boat was long and narrow, with a low canopy to keep out glare. It moved quiet, as a thought. The canal ran through a part of the city where balconies leaned close and laundry hung like flags from lines. Children waved. Old men took off hats. Some people did not wave. They watched with guarded eyes. They had lost sons and daughters to storms before the flood wall rose. They wanted to see if this queen stayed present when rumors rose too. Ben did not ride on the boat. He rowed ahead on a maintenance skiff with 2 engineers. They checked the canal vents and bridge clearances. They carried spare cloth and salt wraps and a bucket of damp sand to weigh down filters if needed. They carried no weapons. The guards had enough of those. Their task was air and order. Near the 3rd bridge, the skiff halted. The forward engineer pointed at a grill set into the canal wall. "Do you smell that?" she asked. Ben did not smell anything at first. Then a hint reached him. It was not a smell like spice or smoke. It was a feeling at the back of the nose, thin and sharp. It reminded him of the station's vent rooms on a hot day after a hard shift. It reminded him of yesterday. "Kill the vent," he said. They opened the grill. The fan inside hummed. There was a small canister fixed to the inner ribs with 2 metal ties. It did not look like a bomb that would break metal. It looked like a tool that would change air. "Do not touch it," Ben said. He took a deep breath and spoke clearly. "I am going to aim this fan up and out. Then I will place cloth over the grill to slow the air while I open the downstream vent to pull the flow away. After that, I will flood the space with cold air from the canal to weigh the plume down and move it under the bridge and out into open air." The engineer nodded. "I will get the cloth and the sand." Ben used a small wrench to turn the fan housing 90 degrees so that air aimed away from the canal surface. He kept his hands steady. He placed a folded layer of carbon cloth over the outer face. He sprinkled a fine brush of charcoal dust on the cloth to improve absorption. He signaled the other engineer to open the downstream vent. Water echoed in the canal. A low pull started. He dipped a bucket into the canal water, lifted it carefully, and poured it onto the stone lip under the grill on. The morning of the summit broke clear and hot. Sunlight touched the roofs and made the river flash like a blade being polished. Bells rang in different quarters as if the city itself were reminding people to breathe. Inside the high hall, where pillars rose like living trees, workers moved with quiet hands and careful feet. The banners of 2 nations hung over the dais, each caught by a slow current of air that Ben had planned the night before. Ben came early with a canvas satchel and a rolled diagram. He kept his tools simple: chalk, charcoal, carbon cloth, cotton, thread dusted with salt, a pocket compass for airflow, a coil of thin wire, and the small portable reader's spare battery. He wore a plain shirt, the same light vest with many pockets and fresh salt-absorbing wraps around his wrists. He looked like what he was, a maintenance tech with a good plan and a calm heart. The guard captain met him by the side door. "We slept in shifts," she said. The hall held steady, no intruders. "Good," Ben said. "Let us finish the map." They worked together. Ben had named it a salt map, but it was really three little ideas joined into one. The first part was the thread. Lengths of cotton line dusted with fine salt and hidden along likely pathways, under the lip of benches, behind the ankles of statues, inside the little grooves in stair rails. If a counterfeit spray passed over the thread, the salt dust would catch the pattern and bloom into tiny lines the reader could see. The second part was the lantern. Small paper packets of salt tucked into lamp housings so that if a strong plume rose toward the ceiling, the reader would see a ring of bright spots light up like a star map and draw an arrow toward the source. The third part was the wind itself. Ben set fans low and quiet in side galleries, pointing them toward vents he had lined with carbon cloth. That made the hall breathe in a predictable way. A clean path in, a clean path out. Simple is better, he told the guards. We do not want a small war of devices. We want the air to tell us the truth. By mid-morning, the delegations began to arrive, a slow line of dignitaries and aides, some proud, some wary, all hot from the walk across the plazas. The Lyrian court-martial directed them with a steady hand. Each person who passed near the bowway dais announced their approach, said their purpose, and waited for permission. It felt formal without being cold, like a dance everyone had learned together in one night. Queen Arya entered as the 12th bell sounded. She wore travel armor without ornament and a cooling cloak that lay across her shoulders like a pale river. Her hair was braided close again against the heat. She paused at the door and took the hall in with a single look. Fans placed, lanes clear, guards at 10 steps, healer at her post with the reader under her cloak. Then Arya walked forward, calm and tall, as if she carried the idea of daylight with her. Ben stood at the edge of the central aisle, not close. He held his diagram folded in his vest. He had rehearsed the plan with the crew twice. He had explained every step until even the newest runner in the hall could say it back to him. He was ready for something to go wrong, because something always does. The chief herald lifted his staff. The hall quieted. In the small pause that followed, Ben heard the fans whisper, felt the air turn like a slow river, and thought of the way a pilot once told him she listened to wind through metal, the way a musician listens to a note. He took one breath in for 4 counts, then let it out for 6. He did not know if the queen matched his breath. He suspected she did. Welcome, Arya said. Her voice carried without effort. We gather to sign a peace that will hold not because it is written, but because we will keep it. We will keep it with our hands and with our habits, with rules we follow every day, not only when the banners are high. Soft agreement moved through the room. Even those who did not love her listened. She spoke briefly about the flood wall, the workers who had built it, and the shared work that had saved the lower quarter from the last storm. She spoke about the new canal locks that would be built by both nations. She spoke about small things more than grand ones. The hall, which had been ready to be impressed, found itself steadied instead. The first delegation stepped forward. The old 10-step rule held without anyone needing to say it. Servants poured water. Scribes clicked their pens. The hall did not feel like a trap waiting to spring. It felt like a place where people had agreed to behave well. At the back of the hall near a carved screen, a man in a plain courier's coat walked along the wall with a small case at his side. He did not look special. He did not move wrong. If you glanced at him once, you would not look twice. That was the point. Ben had asked the guards to watch entrances in the upper galleries. He had asked the engineers to watch vents. He had not asked anyone to watch the carved screen, because it was set behind 2 rows of officials and looked like the least interesting part of the room. The courier stopped near a groove where air pulled toward a high vent. He bent as if to tie his shoe. He slid the case into the groove and opened it a crack. The healer's reader gave one small chirp. She glanced down. The screen showed a dim flicker along the thread under the benches to the left of the dais, like lightning far away. Ben did not move his feet. He lifted 2 fingers at his side. The guard captain saw it. She shifted one line of guards 3 steps to the right, opening the lane from the central door to the dais even wider. The dais lamps, quietly altered into lanterns, glowed imperceptibly to the eye, but on the reader they drew a faint, Arc kept speaking. She looked the way a person looks when they are telling a friend an important truth. Steady and near. The courier squeezed the case. A soft sigh like a sigh of an old bellows passed into the groove. The fan in the gallery took the breath and pulled it upward toward the lamps. On the reader, the ring of bright spots lit like a necklace. The thread lines under the benches bloomed like frost, running straight through the second row and climbing. The steps in little currents that did not match any human motion in the room. The pattern did what Ben had designed it to do. It formed an arrow, a plain one, pointing from the dais toward the carved screen. Screen, the healer said softly. Ben pointed. The guard captain walked, not ran, along the back wall flanked by 2 guards. She reached the screen in 3 breaths. The courier looked up with eyes that said he knew he had already failed. He did not reach for a weapon. He reached for a tiny switch on the side of the case. Hands, the captain said, and took his wrist gently but firmly. She lifted the case, with 2 fingers, and handed it to a guard. Inside was a small diffuser, metal ribs, a thin membrane, and a vial the size of a thumb. The vial carried that same lab code the healer had found at the canal. Record, the captain told the scribe. The scribe stepped up with a small lens. She filmed the reader's map, the arrow lines, the diffuser, and the captured switch. It would matter later that what they claimed now had been seen by many eyes. Arya's face did not change. She finished her sentence and let a small silence bloom like a tree opening its leaves. She looked at the crowd as if to say, "You saw what happened, and you saw how we answered it, with rules, with daylight, with calm." The courier, hand held gently behind his back, spoke like a man who had been waiting for a line. "I was paid to place the case and squeeze it when the herald struck the step twice," he blurted. "I do not know by whom. The agent wore a hood, but the pay came in the name of the Weapons Guild's city office." The words bounced around, the stone like iron beads. Ben felt the air change when people exhaled. He did not look at the Queen to see her response. He watched the crowd's edges, where danger lives. "Names make stories heavy," the healer murmured. The reader lights were fading. The air was clear again, but the hall hummed with a new tone. Arya did not snap to anger. She did not accuse. "If a guild paid for a tool," she said evenly, "it will appear in their books. If a thief used a guild's name, that too will show in time. We will follow proof, not rumor." It was the right answer for peace. It was also the answer that gave whoever had planned this the time to press a second switch. Far up in the shadows of the hall's roof, behind the carved ribs of the ceiling, another device woke. It was not a small bellows. It was a duct, hastily lashed to an old maintenance vent, with 4 cheap little fans that spun on a common wire. The moment the guard's hand touched the courier's case, a timer in the second rig clicked a coil, closed. The duct coughed, the fans whirred. The hall exhaled a broader, denser breath of counterfeit pattern. The healer's reader flared so bright she had to shade the little screen with her hand. The ring of lamps lit like a second sun on the reader. The thread lines bloomed all at once and then blurred with too much data. This was not one plume, it was a sheet. Arya felt the first surge like a wave hitting her ankles. Her training from the canal kicked in. She planted her feet, lifted her palm, and took 4 in, 6 out. The tremor came, not as a wild shake, but as a low hum in her hands and elbows, a signal that her body's quiet net was under pressure. She could ride this if the pressure did not increase, but the pressure was going to increase. "Above," Ben said without raising his voice. He pointed with his whole arm this time. "Ceiling duct." The guard captain did not waste a breath. She signaled the climbers. 3 guards with lines already set at the corners for just such a thing. They moved like clean thoughts up the pillars. The crowd began to shift. Evening light turned the hall's tall windows gold. The crowd had thinned to officials, guards, scribes, and a few reporters who wrote fast and watched faster. The 3 intruders stood at the side with their masks off and their hands open. They were not proud. They answered questions in short voices. The scribe with the lens filmed each answer, the diffuser on the floor, the little metal tag from the ceiling duct, and the readers captured patterns. Queen Arya kept the room gentle. She did not roar for blame. She asked for facts. The healer read out the code stamped on the vials, the same additive list the team had seen by the canal. The guard captain described the sealed hub, the threat to cut power, and the way the room had been landed with dry air. The archivist stepped forward to speak about the chain of custody. She wrapped each piece in cloth and sealed it with wax so later no one could say the city had lied. When it was Ben's turn, he explained like a teacher. He used plain words. He held up a small coil of wire and a square of carbon cloth so everyone could see the tools were ordinary. We changed. Air paths with small steps, he said. We made the room tell the truth. We did not use force, we used rules. A reporter asked if the Queen's reflex made her weak. Arya answered before Ben could. No, she said. A reflex is not weakness. It is a sign that a body is alive. We keep each other safe by preparing the room, by asking permission, and by telling the truth in public. The intruders gave one more piece. They had no names for the leaders who hired them, but they named a place. Rook Street Depot, a warehouse, near the river that the Weapons Guild rented as a training shop. They said a thin man with a lapis blue pin had given them the sealed case. He had not said his name. He had not needed to. Lapis blue was the Duke's stone. The room felt cold for one breath. Then Arya nodded. We will not guess, she said. We will go and look. She signed an emergency warrant that gave the guard captain the right to inspect the depot that night. The archivist co-signed for records. The scribe would film. The healer would carry the reader. Ben would lead the air. They moved as the sun slid down. The city outside was not quiet, but it was softer than day. Lanterns hung from doorways. Street. Cooks fanned small fires. On Rook Street, the river wind felt like a long, slow breath. The depot looked like nothing special. A square brick building with a tin roof and a plain sign that said tools. A narrow alley ran along one side. On the other, a drainage ditch whispered. Two guards in gilled gray sat by the door with their boots on a crate. When they saw the royal party, they jumped to their feet and tried to look sleepy instead of surprised. The guard captain showed the warrant. The guild men stared at it with the faces of people who can read but wish they could not. One reached for a bell. The captain did not stop him. Let the bell ring, let more eyes come. The Queen moved into the lamplight so the street would see her face. Inside, the depot smelled like oil and cut wood. Ben stood in the open door and did not move for a count of 6. He listened. Buildings speak if you let them. This one whispered, fans. Low, cheap, hidden. He spoke softly to the team. We do not rush. We map the air first. He pulled a small pouch of charcoal dust from his vest and tapped it against his palm until his skin was gray. Then he shook his hand once. The dust spread in the doorway like a light fog. In still air it would sink. In moving air it would draw lines. The dust made small rivers toward the back room and a stair that led up to a loft. Back room pulls, Ben said. Loft returns. He cut thin strips of carbon cloth and gave them to 2 engineers. Slip these inside the floor vents as you go, he said. It will drink whatever the back room breathes out. The archivist walked at his shoulder, notebook open, writing down each step like a recipe. Dust, lines, cloth, vents. The scribe filmed the floor where the powder drew gray arrows along cracks. The first room held saw horses, boxes, and a shelf of metal ribs for fans. Nothing strange. The second room held tables, small tools, and a rack of masks. All clean. Too clean. The healer checked the reader and got a faint, steady line, not a plume. A hum. The loft, Ben said. They climbed. The loft was low and hot. A row of small fans ran in a line along the far wall, blowing air into a narrow duct. A canvas dropped over something heavy on a table. Under the table, a small safe hummed. On the roof, a patch of tin had been replaced with new metal. The fans pushed toward that patch. Ben did not touch the canvas. First the room, he said. We make it breathe our way. He walked to the little fans and turned them so they blew up along the wall instead of into the duct. He propped a broom across the duct mouth and covered it with carbon cloth so the room would not draw from the table. He opened a tiny roof vent above a lantern so that hot air would rise and carry any loose dust upward. He spoke as he moved so the guards and the lens would catch the logic. "Make the ceiling drink," he said. "Make the floor quiet." The healer's reader softened at once. The hum did not vanish, but it lost its teeth. "Now the table," Ben said. He lifted one corner of the canvas with 2 fingers. Under it lay a neat set of diffuser parts, membranes like skins, vials with codes, a hand pump, a case like the one from the canal, a ledger book bound in gray cloth. On the ledger's cover, stamped small, was the Weapons Guild emblem and a line that said, "Service and Training, Consumables." The archivist put on linen gloves. She lifted the ledger as if it were a bird. She opened to the last used page. There were dates and numbers. There were lists of vials and membranes and masks and fees. There were names. Some were false. Some were real. A stamp in lapis ink marked a column by the vials. Authorized by LM. The archivist did not guess at initials. She wrote them down and turned to the next page. Ben crouched by the safe. He did not love safes. He loved air. He asked for flour. "Flour," the captain repeated, puzzled. "Kitchen," Ben said. "Anyone near?" A runner slipped out and returned from a tea stall with a paper cone of flour. Ben laughed once. "Thank you," he said. "Bless the cooks." He poured a little flour into his palm and blew it gently across the safe's dial. In the hot loft, the air moved slow and upward. The flour stuck to oil that had collected in tiny grooves where fingers had turned to certain numbers more often than others. 3 little foggy arcs appeared around a few marks on the dial. "It is not a code," Ben said. "It is a hint." He spun the wheel through the likely marks with patient ears. Clicks talked back. He found the notch and opened the safe. Inside there were 3 items. A folded sheet with a diagram of the summit hall's ceiling, marked with tiny X's, a small metal pin of lapis blue cut in the shape of a tear, and a leather wallet with cards. The first card was stamped Duke Malreth, Guild Patron Level 3, Emergency Access. No one breathed for a count of 2. The archivist did not make a sound. She placed each item on clean cloth and sealed them as she had sealed the others. The scribe filmed the safe with the flour dust still clinging to its edges. The guard captain kept her voice even, but a line of muscle stood in her cheek. "Back room," Ben said quietly. "We are not done." They went downstairs. In the back room, behind a hinged shelf, they found a narrow tunnel mouth. Cool air slid through. A small sign on the wall said, "Restoration supplies, do not block." "Where does this go?" the captain asked. The engineer with the neat hands traced the wall with her palm. "Under the street," she said. "It meets the service crawl for the summit hall." Ben looked at the ledger again. He looked at the diagram from the safe. The X marks on the ceiling matched the places where restoration workers had been seen near the chandeliers 2 days earlier. He saw the shape of the plan in one clear picture. The canal device, the square bellows, the ceiling duct, the hub. All of that had been practice. The real blow would be from above at the exact moment when seals were pressed and the city watched. A dramatic breath from the chandeliers would make the queen falter in front of every lens. A rumor would become a picture. A picture would become a weapon. "The chandeliers," Ben said. "The X marks show sockets. They will not look like diffusers. They will look like oil scent bulbs or cleaning caps. If we touch the wrong one, we trigger the field." The captain did not hesitate. "We go now," she said. They sealed the depot and left 2 guards at the door. They took the tunnel. It was tight and dark and smelled like old stone. The healer's reader glowed soft and steady in her hand. Arya did not step into the tunnel yet. She stayed in the street where people could see her. "I will not disappear. At night," she said. "I will meet you at the hall." The crawl met a service stair that rose into the summit hall's walls. They climbed, breath quiet, hands on cold iron. From a grate, Ben looked out across the ceiling at a forest of beams and chains. The chandeliers hung like moons. The restoration crew had done neat work. Too neat. A ring of small caps sat around the base of each chandelier, little brass buttons the color of dust. "Do not pull," Ben said. "We change the room first." He sent for the engineers. They opened the roof flues and fitted each chandeliers, crowned with a simple chimney sleeve that turned it into an updraft tower. They brought in buckets of ice from the kitchen and set them in the corners to make cool sinks on the floor so the air would want to rise in the center. They moved the small fans in the galleries to push air toward the chandeliers, not away from them. They turned the hall,